Hi everyone, welcome back to The Learning Gardener. If you haven't been here before, my name is Pip. Today we are going to be working on the chicken run, and that is for a very specific and I think exciting reason, and that is because we have a few more chickens now. Now I know that some of you are going to be a bit worried about these poor little chickies because we did have an incident with the dogs early on, but as you can hopefully see in the background, we have a temporary fence erected. The dogs cannot get through here, but it's not a great long-term solution, and obviously I've been working heaps on making the enclosure even more structurally sound, the visual barriers, but adding more chickens has increased the noises, so the dogs can obviously hear the chickens more. Not that the dogs are unable to hear 3 chickens, but you know, there's more sounds with more chickens. But what I'm going to do is I've got a fencing guy recruited, and my best friend actually lives 3 doors down. She took out some fencing yonks ago and has been storing it underneath her parents-in-law's place, who live another couple of houses down, and I'm going to have that fencing installed along here to keep the dogs out and to provide a more intense structural barrier. And that is the plan at this point. I am just waiting to hear if everyone can do it and if quotes are reasonable. Otherwise I'll be recruiting my dad. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to introduce you to the chickens, and I need help with names. We have a couple that are pretty much locked in place. So we got 5 extra chickens. I wasn't planning on getting 5, I wanted 5 in total, but it happens. They're cute and you fall in love with them, and they were kept in a very non-ideal situation, so they were pecking at each other because they had no stimulation and no room to move, and so 3 of them are missing varying degrees of feathers and are a bit skittish, the poor little things. But I have spent, I don't know how long, I can't remember now, we've been integrating them slowly. So first I divided the run in half, because even if I kept them in dog crates, like large dog crates, they were still pecking at each other because they were stressed. The second I let them out into half of the run, they stopped pecking each other and they just chilled out, and they were so enthused by the autumn leaves and scratching around. So everyone's having a very good time scratching through the autumn leaves that I bring down from my parents' place. If you haven't seen any of the other videos on my chickens, you won't know that they're called the Bettys. So the original 3 were Big Betty, Partridge Betty, and Freckle Betty, and we've added 5 Bettys. So we've got 2 Silkies, Black Betty and Betty White. Betty White is a white Silky, and Betty White was a champion, so we have named one after Betty White. Black Betty, we have been singing that song on repeat since we got the chickens, so the Black Silky is called Black Betty. I did want to call the Black Silky like Anna Karenina Betty, because she kind of looks Russian with her fluffy head, but she's got quite a bit of gusto to her, so Black Betty seemed appropriate for her. The one I was originally planning on calling Black Betty is a silver-laced Wyandotte, and she's so cute, but she, poor little thing's been lost a few feathers. But so I'm not 100% sure on what her name's going to be. We kind of fluctuated on maybe like Billy Betty, like Billie Jean, because it don't matter if you're black or white, because she's a beautiful black and white chicken. We have debated Halloween themed names because she kind of like has the same coloring as those black t-shirts with the white skeletons on them. Don't know, haven't settled on a name. We have a what are they called, blue laced red splash Wyandotte. So she is very skittish. I was going to call her Betty Davis, but I feel like Betty Davis is like a very strong name, and that poor little thing is so skittish and so scared. And so I'm thinking I'm going to call her Betty Rubble, because she's kind of like soil coloured. And then we got one Brahma, and I love her. Oh my god, I've seen her trip over her own feathers on her feet, and oh, she lets me pat her sometimes when she walks past, and her face kind of really just reminds me of an eagle, so I call her Betty Griffin. And poor little Betty Rubble last night on the perch kept trying to hide under Betty Griffin's legs, and yeah, we got there in the end, and everyone's settled and everyone's getting along really, really well. Big Betty is the top Betty. But yeah, so if you can think of any names for possibly Betty Rubble, the a kind of orange and white coloured Wyandotte and the silver laced Wyandotte, which is the black and white ones, let me know below in the comments. But what we're going to be doing is increasing the amount of area that has water protection, because we've just had about 20 inches of rain in the last 3 weeks, and even though they're pretty dry in there, they're still not dry, and they're currently in there having a dust bath in wet grass. So, you know, each to their own. So I've got this stuff, which is kind of like cafe plastic, and we're going to pop that up and over. I've also got some thinner versions of this to put on the makeshift coop that we made, so there's no wind coming through, and to wrap around the nesting boxes that I'm going to make from milk cartons. We've basically got a whole bunch of stuff to do to the Betty's enclosure. We've got to get it all done, and we've got to set up another water feeder, and I've got to make adjustments to the food feeder because I still haven't worked it out. So I bought a new drill bit for fixing that, but we've got a ton of work to do, and this has been already a very long intro, so apologies. I'm just going to get into it, and I hope you guys enjoy this video. I'm sure it was easy to tell from me clambering over this enclosure that there are areas that are easier to climb than others, and the only area that I still haven't put an additional external layer of wire around the bottom, which I will. I just knew I was going to do this, and so I know that where there's external wire that comes up to 900, it makes it almost impossible to climb up the structure. The only place where it isn't is just there, thank God, because that was where I needed to do most of the climbing. But obviously I don't want to abuse the structure being willing to support me as I clamber all over it. So hopefully this is the last time I'll have to climb all over the enclosure. Not that I've done it that often, but obviously we had to do it when wiring the enclosure together and a little bit when we put the tarp on. Now I'm hoping that this has enough cable ties on it. It's obviously very difficult to tie on, and now I'm kind of regretting the choice of cable ties because wire would have been more permanent, but I'm worried that the wire would actually cut through the plastic, and maybe with our winds in spring the same will be true of the cable ties, but I guess we'll find out. But at least in the interim it should keep them a little bit drier. It's not a perfect coverage situation. It's the best I could do. Part of the reason why I've placed the sheets where I've placed them is because of where the Rio mesh is on the inside. So here the Rio mesh is on the outside up to about here. And then the Rio mesh is on the inside, and we rolled the aviary mesh or the rat, mice and snake proof mesh over the top. And that means that I've got the Rio exposed on the inside, which makes it easier to hang things like pecking feeders, self feeders, all of that sort of enrichment stuff. But what I've been struggling with the tarp coverage is that I don't want the whole coop to be in darkness. That the whole point of moving all the wood that I moved was so they could have some sunlight. But obviously I want them to be able to have like their pecking feeders and things like that without the rain getting on it. And I was really cramped for space for that, which was why we've now got this. But once we get to about here-ish, we laid the aviary mesh on the inside of the Rio, so it's harder to hang stuff here. So I wasn't as worried about the plastic going all the way over the top. But what I was worried about was protecting their favorite sunbathing and nesting area a little bit more, so it hopefully doesn't get saturated in the next rainstorm. This part of the coop adjustments I had tried to do while we were in the rainstorm, but had slipped on the wood and decided it was too dangerous. And so now everything was a little bit dry. It was time to try again. What I wanted to do was to put a pool noodle that I'd cut into thirds and slit along the inside, along the top piece of the Rio mesh, so that it didn't tear the tarp when there was wind. Unfortunately, during the process, I discovered a very poisonous spider come running at me, but it is now no longer in this world. And we got the little chunk of pool noodle on top of the corner of the Rio mesh, so hopefully that means that the tarp doesn't break down as fast as it might have if we'd left the sharp corners of the Rio poking into the tarp. The next job that I wanted to work on was the feeders. So I used chains to attach my hanging feeders in the coop for enrichment purposes, and that is just because when I was watching Gardening Australia, they recommended chains are easier to prevent mice and rats and things like that from climbing. I don't know if that's accurate, but that sounded like a good recommendation, so that's what we've got going. At the moment, I have a homemade tallow covered sunflower seed pecking thing, and they hate it. They just don't eat sunflower seeds. I don't know why. They're not proper chickens. It doesn't matter whether they're fresh off the flower, if they're in their seed mix, or if I've made a little peck feeder for them. They're just not interested in sunflower seeds for some unknown reason. And yeah, I don't know why. But so I've also had my dad work on building a ramp to facilitate access to the roosting area. And I put a low bar in there for the silkies to try and help them, seeing the night before they'd continuously jumped off or fallen off the roosting area. I think some of that is they just don't know how to roost properly. They never had roosts before, but I just want to make sure everybody has access and a safe place to roost. The other thing we need to work on is this self-feeder that the chickens have. And as I said, they don't know how to chicken properly. They don't know how to roost. They don't know how to feed themselves, which is very frustrating, especially seeing I work very long days when I go to work. So I wanted to try and fix this homemade feeder. I didn't have a large drill bit when I made this, so I just made multiple small holes in it. So I got a bigger, flatter drill bit and tried to widen the hole, but it did actually crack the plastic bucket, which was unfortunate. I don't know if it would have happened anyway, or if it was because I'd already drilled a hole in the bucket beforehand. But yeah, it didn't really work out all that well. So I had to make some more repairs. I used a longer eye bolt to try and draw the chicken's eyes to it. I think I need to change the dongle on the end. They don't seem that interested, even when I strap spinach on it. But it was a little bit cracked open and a little bit wide, and the food was just pouring out. So I just used electrical tape because I don't have another spare bucket and it would be a waste of a bucket. And I just made the hole narrow enough that food can come out, but not so wide that it just pours out. And then we took it back into the coop, filled it back up and hung it back up. The thing that I was really happy about seeing is, number one, the food was falling out when you gave the dongle a little wobble. So hopefully at some point someone will work it out and then they'll all start feeding themselves. But you can see it's still pouring out here. So I needed to add a little bit more electrical tape just to the outside. What I was stoked to see is that the three little skittish girls used the ramp to go up to roost, just to get away from, I guess, the scariness of me putting the bucket on the chain. And it was really nice to see that they'd gone up there and that they were using that area for safety. So I'm hopeful that over time they might work out how to roost, especially at night. I have gone out multiple times at night and tried to correct their position, but they either just decide to curl up in a ball on the floor with the silkies, or they try and, particularly we're possibly calling her X-Ray Betty, this little black and white Wyandotte, she tries to hide under Betty Griffin's legs as if Betty Griffin is her mum. So maybe it's just because they're young, who knows. But because they're doing that, I wanted to put a bit of plastic along the lower edge of the coop area just to minimize the wind that comes through there in winter, just in case they decide that they're going to stay low. And I also put some more on the inside pallet just as a windbreaker. And I mean, I don't really think they're going to need it during winter because we've made sure that where the wind comes through, we've got windbreakers, we've got tarps, we've got everything, and you do want a little bit of ventilation, but I just want to make sure they're not going to get cold. So anywhere where there was a risk where they might get cold, I did put some. I can always easily remove it. While I was doing that, they were taking a dust bath in wet grass, which is a bit sad, and this is their favorite area. So I decided to borrow my friend's lawnmower and trundle down to her in-laws house and mow some grass for the chickens. And I brought it back, and I was only going to do 2 loads, but when I came back they were so happy and settled in the grass until Black Betty came and poked everybody, that I decided to go back and do a couple more laps and spread some grass around through the coop, which made the new girls really happy. They love to scratch, and I think it's because they never had anywhere to scratch before, because they were just cooped up in this horrible very small, very full of chickens cage before, and they were just happy as clams, and Betty Griffin was making friends with my friends, which was lovely to see. And she's such a cutie. She kept coming up to me, and I kept saying, I feel like she's gonna like try and fly up to me, and like literally 2 seconds later she tried to jump up and into my arms. And I think she understood that my job is to put her to bed and show her where to go, so she wanted me to put her to bed. So she still didn't end up where I put her, but you know, we tried, and we'll keep trying. They're just so beautiful, and it's happy to see. I'm just so happy to see them happier as a flock, especially as the days go by. But we do need names, so if you have any ideas for the black and white Wyandotte and for the brown and white Wyandotte, I'd appreciate that. But thanks so much for watching, and hopefully we'll see you in the next one. That's my finger, sweetheart. That's not a big worm. Betty Griffin, you're a silly sausage.
She's avoiding everything that, yeah, really are.